are, but welcome everybody who is able to find us. My name is Amy. I am a bookseller at Schuler Books, which is an indie bookstore in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We also have locations in a location in Okemos, Michigan, which is near Lansing, and we are a sister store with Nicola's Books in Ann Arbor. Tonight is the kickoff of our monthly series, Rendezvous with Romance, partnership with Avon Books. I am so excited that every month I will get to talk to authors of newly released romance novels. I have been reading romance for about 25 years. I started with Avon's teen romance, the Avon True Romance, way back in the day. And I can't get enough. So this is a dream come true. I'm very excited to talk with these three authors tonight and to continue every month to talk to more authors. The books that we are talking about tonight, I'll show and introduce in just a moment. They're all available at Schuler Books, at Nicola's Books. They're also available on our websites, schulerbooks.com and nicolasbooks.com, and we do ship worldwide. So if you are tuning in from anywhere, we can get those books to you, and you'll be supporting a local independent bookstore by ordering through us. All right, I am going to get started and introduce our guests tonight. First, we have Gina Conkle. Hello, Gina.
Hi. Hello.
Gina writes Georgian romances with a dash of Scots, as well as Viking romances with heat and adventure. Her historical romances offer a fresh, addictive spin on the genre with plenty of witty banter and sexual tension. Her writing career began in Southern California, and despite all that sunshine, she still prefers books over beaches and stone castles over sand castles. And her book that we're talking about tonight, A Scot Is Not Enough, is the second in the Scottish Treasures series. A tiny little blurb, and she'll talk about it a little bit more. A gentleman of virtue, a woman of questionable repute, and an explosive partnership. So Gina, thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Amy.
All right, then we have Addison Fox. Welcome, Addison.
Right.
Addison is a lifelong romance reader, always in search of her next happy ever after. Once she discovered she found as much joy writing about romance as she did reading it, she never looked back. Addison lives in New York with an apartment full of books, a laptop rarely out of reach, and a wily beagle who keeps her running, who we've already heard a couple of times.
Heard a few times.
So we will be talking about The Cowboy Says Yes, which is the first in a new series, the Rustler's Creek series, which is about a reality cooking star, a marriage for show, and a second chance at happily ever after. So thank you for being with us, Addison. And finally, last but not least, Caroline Linden. Caroline knew from an early age she was a reader and not a writer. She earned a math degree from Harvard University and wrote computer code before turning to fiction. Since then, her books have been translated into 17 languages around the world and have won numerous awards. She is a Midwestern transplant in New England and a big Boston Red Sox fan, according to her website. All right,
slow start this year.
We're going to talk about her new release, All the Duke I Need, which is third in the Desperately Seeking Duke series. She is a duchess in all but name. He is not a duke at all, but could he be her hero? We will find out, or you will find out if you read the book. So welcome to all of you. It's, again, such a treat to be able to talk to you tonight. Again, I have been a romance reader and a romance fan, a romance enthusiast for many years. And it's just a joy to be part of an organization at Schuler Books that is celebrating romance and is partnering with publishers to get the word out about how wonderful romance stories are. I'd like to start, I gave tiny little blurbs about your books, but I would love if each of you would talk for a few minutes about your new release, where it falls in its series, and maybe what the inspiration was for it. So who would like to take it away?
Addison, let's go alphabetical.
I'm happy to go first.
Okay, Addison, go ahead.
All right. So The Cowboy Says Yes is the first book in my Rustler's Creek series. And the inspiration for this was actually on the Food Network. So the pandemic had just started. We've all been, consuming a bit more television maybe than we usually do, obviously reading a lot more books, but I was sitting there one morning and I was catching up on some things on the Food Network, and I just had the spark of an idea, which is What if you had this Food Network, a Food Network equivalent, you know, for purposes of fiction, whose life had suddenly become very, very big. It had started, you know, she was just kind of cooking around the ranch that her husband owns and his family owns. And suddenly her life and her dreams became a lot bigger than you might have expected. I had also, for a very long time, had always wanted to do a marriage in trouble story. But I'm a firm believer as a writer that sometimes you just have to have the right story hit you to kind of explore something. And this book ended up being it. And so Zach and Hadley are my two main characters. They love each other very much. We know that from the beginning, but they need to kind of find their way back to in love because their lives have gotten very, very big. And I had such a good time writing the story. I really love these characters. I really love the journey that they went on. And what I realized at the end was kind of exploring, what does happy ever after mean? And what does it mean to grow a happy ever after with somebody else? So that really is kind of what it's about. But it was a joy to write, and I'm super excited that Zach and Hadley are out in the world now.
Yes. All right, Caroline, how about you?
Okay, my book is the third in the series, and it's actually the last book. The series is called Desperately Seeking Duke, and the whole idea behind the series is this is the last book, so it's the wrap-up book. So it's really more about closing off the whole series in a lot of ways, as opposed to just telling the story of two characters. But the idea that I had was, what would happen if a dukedom suddenly did not have an heir? They didn't know who was going to be next. And what if the current duke was not in great health and he didn't have any children and he wasn't likely to have any? And so the whole genesis of the series is that the duke's elderly mother looks around and says, it's going to be one of these distant cousins, and we better haul them all in here and tell them they need to get their act together, because it's going to be one of them, and none of them are ready. So the first two books are about the two distant cousins that she hauls in and gives them their instructions, and she gives them some money as well to clean up their lives, which they do. And then this third book is they are searching for a possible lost heir who's been missing for 85 years in France. And the Duchess is very stressed out about this, and the Duke's health is getting worse. And the romance is between the Duchess's ward, her step granddaughter, essentially Philippa, and the new estate steward that the Duchess has very, very reluctantly hired to manage things. And he's a young man, and he comes in and he wants to update and improve everything. And it's up to Philippa to keep the Duchess from firing this activist young estate steward, who is also, of course, super hot.
Yeah.
So,
Of course.
as all estate managers should be, right?
Indeed.
It's set in 1788 Britain. So it's like after the American Revolution and before the French, which is a very interesting and kind of turbulent time. But anyway, I had a great time writing it. Even during the pandemic, I really wanted to make their story fun and funny and kind of all about finding family, whether it's the family you lost or the family that you've made for yourself, and figuring out where, you know, your place is in the world and who you're going to share it with.
Love a found family story line anytime. All right, Gina, tell us about your book.
Well, my book is A Scot Is Not Enough. It's the second book in the Scottish Treasures series. And the genesis of this series is, if you've seen the movie Ocean's 8, or you're aware that Sandra Bullock, who starred in it. So it is 1753, post-Culloden London. And it was a marriage of Ocean's 8 meets real life treasure hunters. I had read about the lost treasure of Archaic, and I'm kind of a history nerd, so I just kept digging. And this series was conceived 2015 or 2016, and it kind of sat in the back burner. So a couple things about this series. One, it's the arch villainess. So it's a woman, I'll just tell you that right off the bat. And her arc goes over the whole series. So she doesn't get her comeuppance until the last book. The next thing, the first book was a second chance at love romance. This one is a woman of ill repute meets the stodgy government man who is supposed to investigate her. And they fall in love, secrets are revealed, shocking secrets, but even more shocking secrets come up in the third book in the series. The first one was maybe a little more serious. This one is more, Scott is not enough, it's probably more bantery, a little more wit, maybe a little more heat than the first one, and very fun to write. So I really enjoyed, I tend to camp out in the 1750s, 1760s. I also tend to write a lot of commoners. There's certainly nobility in there, but it's like a grittier slice of life, if you will. And I always tend to find my stories from something that I read in history. So there you go.
I also have to note that your hero does like peak romance hero action by reading aloud to her in bed.
Yes.
I swooned because
Oh, thank
that
you.
is, you just can't beat that. Yeah.
And a historical note, the book that he read to her, the title was a real book that was popular at that time. And the
Okay.
storyline, I was like one of those woo kind of moments.
Uh-huh.
It was about the Scottish woman who went to London. And in the book, the heroine is Cecilia is a Scottish woman, goes to London. She's searching for something. And then what she finds, and she ends up in a river. So I guess that's a spoiler. My Cecilia ends up in a river. So like the things, that book, that total parallel.
Just
So
all
I'll just stop
together.
there.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, you've talked a little bit on it, but I would love to hear a little bit more about what your writing process is. You know, do you start with the character? Do you start with the storyline? Do you start with the conflict? Do you start with a single scene? And then also you talked a little bit, Gina, about the sort of the research and the historical aspects. I'm curious, you know, how much research goes into, you know, either a series or a single book. So we can go in alphabetical order again if we want to pop back up to Addison and
Okay.
tell us about your writing process and the sort of research that you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I tend to be, for me, and this is actually my 35th book. So I feel like while I think our process can have a lot of elasticity, I feel fortunate that I feel like I've hit a stage where I've got a sense of what my process is, a relatively, you know, solid sense of what makes me tick creatively. And for me, it's always a spark of characters in my mind. It's always what I see first. There's something that I see in these people that I'm putting together. But what I find then tends to happen is a lot of different things will spark an idea. It's if the story stays and I keep thinking about them, and then I start to see scenes, and then I start to see more scenes. And so that's when I begin to get a sense that my subconscious is cooking up something that I can actually work with and make like all the way into a whole book. Yeah. So, but like I said, for me, it's always the characters first, and then everything else just kind of ends up building around them and whomever these people are that become very, very real to me in the writing.
Wonderful. What about you, Caroline? What does your process look like?
It kind of feels like inventing the wheel from scratch every time. I don't know if that's just me. I, as you read in my biography, I was not a writer at all. Like, I think I was 30 before I admitted that I could possibly write anything longer than like a 10-page term paper. So it does, all these years later, still feel like I'm getting away with something that I'm not really qualified to do. But I think for me, most of my books are a part of a series. And so usually when I'm working on a new idea and developing it, I come up with the very bare skeleton of what would be the situation, the inciting element of the series. Like what is gonna set these off, all these books, these characters. And then, like Addison said, it doesn't really happen until it's really weird. It's I don't know, like a character just sort of strolls through my head and says the exact right thing. And I'm like, yes, you're the guy, you're the woman, you're the person who's going to pick up this plot line and carry it through. And they always surprise me, like weird people wander onto the page. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to be anything other than on these 2 pages. And the next thing I know, readers are emailing me saying, where's the story about this throwaway character, which I think is immensely flattering because like, I don't know how I did it. He did it himself. It wasn't me at all. So yeah, I don't have a good answer because I never took any serious writing class. I avoided those like the plague. It's like, sign me up for another section of physics, please.
Oh, well, I think that those of us who read your romance novels would argue that you definitely are qualified and
Thank you.
know what you're doing. What about you, Gina? What does your process look like?
Oh, I was just going to say that actually I got into a bidding war with another woman to have Caroline critique a.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yes, on the Beaumont.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think it was last year. But
Yeah.
anyway, total side note there.
I'm sure you don't need me, but if you ever want to call me up and like brainstorm, I love
Thank you.
brainstorming other people's books more than anything.
I appreciate that. My process is a mess, and that's probably why I'm a slow writer. I call myself a plantser. I read a lot of nonfiction, and so something in history will kind of pique my interest. And then I call it like a mind movie starts playing, and I hear the voices and I just start writing. And there's only one series that I've ever like vision boarded, and I wrote that one actually pretty fast, at least the first book. And it's kind of like, oh, maybe I'm onto something there. I should do that again. And I think I will moving forward. But my process is basically, I find something in history, it intrigues me. I start hearing people in this mind movie and I start writing stuff down. And I have the same thing that happens. Secondary characters just sort of come alive. Yeah. And like in this series, The Scottish Treasures, Rory McLeod did not plan him at all. I was writing that scene that they were, this one is in book 1, that they're charging up the steps, and then suddenly there's this outrider with dusty boots who comes up and sparkling blue eyes, and it's like, okay, so this guy's also a Scot. So
Yep.
it just kind of went from there. So I am trying to be better and be more organized and like get some plotting chops, but I'm more like that hook, and then the characters, and then, okay, by the way, yeah, I got a plot. So
it's terribly fun to read romance, even if you don't know that it's going to be part of a series. When you meet those side characters and think, are they gonna get their happy ending, or are they not going to come back again, and start to see where their story might come out. So I love it when they come out.
One more thing, I call it like these little serendipitous moments. So in the first book in the series, when they were doing the heist, and I wrote the scene where they're taking out the gold from the cabinet. And at first, like my brain was saying, there's a sheaf of papers in there. And I was like, no, I got to get this done. So I was writing really fast and I ignored it. And then this voice in my head said, no, go back and put those papers in there. So I did. And I didn't know at the time what they were. I didn't know until actually writing the second book. I know I feel so disorganized amongst these like powerhouse writers, but now I know. And it was like a moment of, oh my gosh, that's the real motive for it. So yeah, I love those serendipitous moments.
It's magic. It's truly magic.
Yeah.
And you just realize that there's all this story that's happening in gray matter somewhere. And like you said, that voice is telling you that for a reason.
Yeah.
It's got a purpose.
Yeah, your brains are magical.
Can I just say, I have really missed writers' events because I love talking to other people who don't look at you like you're possessed. When you admit that you have this whole world of people who live inside your head, but they're not like your imaginary friend. They're complete distinct personalities of their own, and they do stuff you don't want them to.
Yeah.
And they tell you what to do. I love you guys. I love you guys so much.
Caroline, I made the mistake of bringing that up on a first date once. He never called again. So for any of you out there that are thinking of being a writer and you're single, do not bring up those voices on the first date. It doesn't go over, doesn't land quite the way you think it will.
No. So this is a tangent question, but in response to that, what, like, romance as a genre, and we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that in a few minutes, but it has connotations to people, especially who don't read a lot of romance, about what it is or isn't. So I'm curious, what is what's the weirdest response or reaction you've gotten from either a reader or someone you were talking to when they heard that you write romance novels? Gina, you look like you have a response.
You have a response, Gina.
Okay. All right. So my husband works in biotech, and that's where I used to work in biotech. That's where we met. And then I became an elementary school teacher. So talk about a zig and a zag. And now I'm a romance writer. So his latest job is they are like high tech imaging for structural biology elements. I'll just put it there. So when he was talking with the it was two CEOs, and they were like, oh, so, you're here in San Diego. That's where we live. And they said, and what about your wife? And he said, oh, she's a writer. Oh, what does she write? And he said, well, she writes historical romance, Viking and Georgian. And they said, she writes bodice rippers? And so he was like, well, and then he started to, because he'll come to my defense and say like, no, and he's read some of my books and I don't ask him to. It's like, and then he'll come back and say, I think in this part, like, so that's very, anyway, that was my latest one.
Yeah. Any other funny responses?
The funniest one for me was when I told my kids who were very young at the time. I think my son was in kindergarten or first grade, and I told him I'd written a book, and here it was, this box of books. And of course, he didn't really know what it was about, but he thought it was so interesting and cool. Like, he picked it up and he held it. He couldn't read yet, and he carried it around, and then he would start. He was this really cute, chubby cheeked little blonde toddler. And we would be out somewhere randomly, and he was very friendly. So he would just say to random people, hey, you know what? And they lean down thinking he's going to tell them about his dog. And he goes, my mom wrote a book. Do you want to buy a copy? Everybody. I've never had such a good PR person.
Yeah. Who can say no?
That is perfect. Actually, Caroline, my story was going to be somewhat similar. My sister calls me. This has been several years ago now, but my niece was in kindergarten, and my sister gets a call from the kindergarten teacher saying, your daughter kind of told me something today and I wasn't quite sure what to take away from it. And she proceeded to tell the story of how her aunt writes romance novels. And so my sister said, yes, she does. My sister kind of gave the teacher the lowdown, it is true. So we're doing FaceTime later. And I said, oh, sweetie, I said, I hear you told the teacher I write books. And she kind of got that little shy face, that a 6-year-old can perfect. And I said, well, what did you tell her my books were about? She goes, I said they were about love.
Aww.
So I just, that story is just always just, it made me smile. And now that she's 13, she wants to read them, and I keep telling her, no, you're not allowed yet. So
Right. Give it just a couple more years.
Need to wait a little longer.
Yeah. Well, that leads well into my next little question. I want to talk a little bit about romance as a genre, especially for people who might be watching who aren't familiar with the genre. In order to be categorized as a romance, a book has to have you know, the romantic relationship or the love story has to be central. It's not a secondary plot point, and it has to have some sort of emotionally satisfying ending. So a happily ever after, or happy for now. So if one of the main characters dies at the end, that's not that's not a romance. It might be a love story, but it's not a romance novel. So I'm curious what it is that you really like or enjoy about writing romance as a genre, and also what you find to be the most challenging about writing romance as a genre. Let's see.
Amy, some of it I would say for me, I think part of what I love about writing it is one of the things I love about reading it. To your point, genre fiction has certain conventions to it. You know, in a romance, you know, they will end up together in some sort of happy situation, whether it's happily ever after or happy for now. There's something satisfying there. In a mystery, you know, the killer gets caught. In, you know, in science fiction, there's certain world building. Genre fiction has very specific constraints around it. Mm-hmm. But within that, then there's this huge canvas of what you can actually do, because as long as you finish with that and meet that expectation, mm-hmm. the canvas is really yours to paint in whatever story you want to tell, whatever way you want to tell it, whatever, you know, whatever dynamics you want to put in there. And I think that's part of the fun, is that you get that emotional satisfaction of mm-hmm. kind of you're in these arms that you trust, right? Like when I pick up a romance novel, I know that I'm going to be happy when I hit the last page, no matter what happens in between. Yeah. But as a writer, it's so much fun to, like I said, get to play with all those different pieces and try something different, and, you know, try tell a story that's unique to that story and to that couple and that scenario and that world that you're building.
Yes. Yes. What about you, Caroline? What do you enjoy about writing romance, and what do you find to be challenging?
Well, the challenging part is it's hard to write a book. I keep waiting to hit that groove where it will be easier, and I'm like at 30 books now and it hasn't happened. So Addison, if you have any secrets, would you let me know?
You know, I hope I wasn't misleading before. It doesn't get easier. My process is my process, but it doesn't get easier at all.
Oh man. All right. The thing that I think is great about it is it's just universal, and the characters can be doing anything else. Like a romance novel can be literally like almost any other kind of book, except the kind where the person dies at the end. They can be invading an alien planet, or they can be spying on Napoleon, or they can be solving mysteries and finding the bad guys. Like whatever you like in any type of fiction, you can put a romance in that and hit both urges at the same time. So that's what I like about it. There's pretty much something for everyone, unless you want something depressive where your main character dies at the end. Then, you know, you can find a romance that scratches that itch, in my opinion. It can be a Western, or like, you know, anything you name. They can be in ancient Rome, you know, climbing through the catacombs, like whatever you want to come up with, whatever you like. All you need are, you know, 2 or 3 or 4, like whatever floats your boat, people who are going to find their, you know, soulmates, I guess, and stick together and be like, all right, this is it. You are the person for me. So I think it's just kind of universal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Gina?
The first phrase that came to mind was "love makes the world go round." And then the second thing that came to mind when you say, like, we keep writing, like the you know, there is the guaranteed HEA. And I know some people are like, well, you know, is that formulaic? No, actually it's not. And I'll say it's not because there was something that came to mind from a high school English teacher. She had this one student who was arguing with her, like, oh, you know, you tell us that we have to do these papers, and you give us this tough parameter, and it has to be like this and this and this. And he's like, where's the creativity in that? And her response was, the creativity is in between those boundaries. Like, how good can you get with those boundaries, within those boundaries? And if you think about all the tropes and how you can twist all the tropes, and you can take the archetypes that we love, like the moody, broody hero, or the really hot cowboy, or the Duke in training, or whatever. It's like, yeah, there's so many varieties, and the creativity falls within those boundaries. So yeah, I see it as like, I'm a woman of a certain age, I'll say, and I do not ever plan on retiring, because I think writing, I have so many stories because there are so many variations on these tropes that we all love, and the characters, the types of characters we love. So yeah, it's an unlimited supply.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tropes is the other thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about. So for those that might be watching that aren't familiar with that term, those are story elements or story devices that you can find in all stories that are just somehow familiar. They might seem cliche because you see them frequently, but like you said, Gina, you can do so much and so many different things with one trope, and you can combine tropes and you can flip tropes on their head. One of the sort of popular romance tropes is the only one bed trope, where you somehow end up in a room overnight and there's only one bed. I recently read a book, India Holton's newest one, The League of Gentlewomen Witches, where the two main characters end up at an inn. And so you're thinking, only one bed, they're going to have to end up with, and they go in this room and there are two beds, and they kind of look at each other and push the beds together and make only one bed. And I had tears. I was like, see, we're all expecting this trope, and you just turned it on its head and made something completely new. I mean, it blows my mind. I can read 100 romance novels with the same trope, and it will be a different story, a different twist, a different whatever. So my questions about tropes then are, do you have a favorite trope that often comes up in your stories frequently, and is there a trope that you've always wanted to write that hasn't found its way into one of your stories yet?
So funny you should ask that question. So I love amnesia stories.
Okay.
Love amnesia stories. To the comment I made earlier, you just kind of need the right book to tell an amnesia story. The second book in the Wrestlers Creek series, which is Hadley, the heroine, it's her sister. Her sister and her first love, he gets amnesia through the things that happen. In my research, I worked very hard to make it as realistic as possible. I did find the very good and fortunate fact that amnesia does not happen in real life nearly as often as it happens in entertainment. So I think that's a good thing. But I know personally, there are just not enough amnesia books in the world as far as I'm concerned. If that is the trope, I will pick it up and I will devour it happily. Okay. But I had never had the right story for myself as a writer. And I was so excited when it just completely fit the next story and the story I wanted to tell. So amnesia is for me. And then the other one is, I'm a huge sucker for the boss secretary trope. I know secretary is not as appropriate a word in contemporary, but I credit it to seeing Working Girl when I was like 15 years old. And Harrison Ford, was Harrison Ford in his prime. And I will tell you, I grew up to have an office job, and I never once have seen a man at work who looks like Harrison Ford. So, like, cute lifelong disappointment, lifelong professional disappointment. But I've always had a thing for that trope as well, and I definitely think Working Girl was one of the reasons why.
Okay, all right. What about you, Caroline?
Well, the best trope is clearly enemies to lovers. I think at least 80% of my books are enemies to lovers, or maybe frenemies to lovers. But there's just so much conflict, and you can always know, like just in the last season of Bridgerton, when everybody was saying, oh, they hate each other, and you're like, you could tell underneath it that they hated each other because they were so attracted to each other. And so I like that a lot. On things I've always wanted to write, I want to write a heist series so bad. And I can't. I'm still in search of the good idea, the right idea that will take off. And I keep hoping it will happen. Loretta Chase tells me that every now and then a book just descends from the heavens into your brain and you just type it all out as it unspools before you. And so I have my fingers crossed that that will happen for me, and it will be a heist story with enemies to lovers. And maybe there will only be one bed, but I will be so happy if it's a heist.
All right, what about you, Gina?
Well, it's funny, as soon as Addison said amnesia story, of like, that one scares me. I don't know why. It's just like, oh, I don't think I could do it. I'm sure I could if I applied myself, but so that one would be the one that but the ones that intrigued me and scared me a little was writing like the bad girl and the upright hero. I just love that combination. And I mean, I want to get like some really bad girls, like harlots, and I just, like the series Harlots, like, yeah, come on, let's give the bad girls some screen time. So, or book time, I should say. But I really love Marriage of Convenience, and I've only written one Marriage of Convenience romance.
Okay.
So I should probably do more of those. I just love them. I love reading them. And I love a brooding hero. I know that's an archetype, not really a trope, but
Yeah.
just let throw that in there.
Yeah, they kind of overlap a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my game that I have for us is a rapid fire this or that with tropes. So I'll give 2 tropes and you have to pick one. Sometimes there are some of these that you could probably have both, but I'm going to make you pick one just, for the sake of the game.
What's the qualification? Is this something we want to write, something we like?
Up to you. You can decide how you're picking it.
Okay.
Whether it's something you want to read, something you want to write, something you have written, just rapid fire. If you had to pick between these 2, which would you pick? Let's see. So the first one is love at first sight or second chance romance?
Second chance.
Second chance.
Second chance.
Okay. We already know somebody's answer to this, but friends to lovers or enemies to lovers?
Enemies.
Enemies.
Okay. Unrequited love or a forbidden love with mutual pining?
Oh,
Forbidden.
Forbidden?
I don't know. They're both kind of sad. They're both really hard to write, I think.
They'll end happily eventually, you know that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. A fake relationship, fake dating, or marriage of convenience?
Well, I guess you heard mine, Marriage of Convenience.
I think marriage of convenience too. But they're kind of the same thing. It's just the marriage of convenience in like historicals is because you can't get out of it. You can't get a divorce.
Right.
But now like you can have a fake relationship, you can have a fake marriage and get divorced. So I think they're pretty equal.
Yeah.
And they're both awesome.
All right. A workplace romance or siblings best friend romance?
Workplace, that lingering Harrison Ford thing. So it's a workplace romance for me.
I like siblings best friend, even though none of my brothers had any friends who were remotely attractive.
My sisters, my sisters are far enough apart from me that it never happened for me either.
Yeah, I'm the oldest, so that, yeah.
Yeah, I was the oldest too.
Workplace.
Yeah.
All right. Again, we heard about one of these: secret identity or amnesia. So Addison, we know.
Amnesia.
Secret identity.
Yeah.
Secret identity. Yeah.
An alpha hero protector or a damsel saves the day?
Damsel saves the day.
I'm old school, alpha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do love alpha. Although this is where I might do a distinction where love reading alpha hero would enjoy writing the damsel saves the day.
Yeah. And that's one where I like to combine. I would I would want to combine them. Like I love reading an alpha hero protector, but I also want a strong female lead who can save herself if she needs to.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, age gap or unexpected baby.
Oh, age gap.
I've done more unexpected babies than age gap. So I would lean towards the babies.
Okay.
I think I'll go with the baby too.
Yeah. Runaway bride or kidnapped.
Mm.
Runaway bride.
Kidnapped, I think.
Yeah, I'm gonna go kidnapped.
No. Okay.
Kidnapped from her wedding, from the altar. By her brother's best friend.
It's
Who
his
knows
enemy.
she's having his secret baby.
And he gets hit by a carriage wheel on the way that flies off and gets amnesia.
He gets amnesia. Yes, and she has to take care of him.
Nothing beats a sick bed, having to care for them.
Very true. Very true.
Oh my goodness. All right, if you were doing retellings, a Beauty and the Beast story or a Cinderella story?
Beauty and the Beast, but my favorite Disney is actually Cinderella.
Okay.
Gina, I think we're having a mind melt because I would totally agree with you there. I love Beauty and the Beast, but there is something special about Cinderella as a movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Beauty and the Beast, maybe.
You get that grumpy, sort of broody hero when you have the.
Yeah, but then it's also like an enemies to lovers where they don't like each other.
Yeah.
And they have to get like everything for me comes back to, do they like each other in the beginning? If the answer is yes, I'm like, but why?
Why do they like each other?
Well, should we ask you, Amy, what's yours to read
Yeah.
between the two?
Between Beauty and the Beast and Cinderella, probably Beauty and the Beast.
Mm.
But Cinderella would probably be my favorite Disney movie. So I don't know. I don't know if I don't know. I could dive into the psychology of that, but
Dissect it.
we'll save that for another episode. All right, if we're doing paranormal, vampires or shifters?
Shifter.
Oh.
Vampires for me.
I guess shifters, because I just recently binged Jelena Andrews' Kate Daniels series, and that was like so hot.
I like them both. I probably read more vampire just because when Twilight was out, I read anything and everything that was anything like it, but I enjoy them both. All right, so getting a little bit more specific, I don't know if these are specifically tropes as much as like a tiny little written element, but if your hero is walking in and catches your heroine's eye, is it because he's leaning suggestively in the doorway or smirking with an eyebrow raised?
Oh, he's leaning.
I was going to say leaning, but if he's rolling, can I add a third? If he's rolling his shirt cuffs up and we see forearms? The magical things on a romance hero. So
Forearm porn for you, Addison.
if I could add a third, that would be my third. And if he's leaning, rolling up his shirt sleeves, like that's even better.
The next this or that is tightly clad thighs or exposed forearms.
Clearly, I'm giving myself away on that one. Definitely the forearms.
I think forearms do count as a trope in romance. That's definitely.
I think Addison answered for all of us.
They're a character all their own. All right, your heroine, is she attracting his gaze by sighing and biting her lower lip or letting out a breath she didn't know she was holding?
Oh, she's letting out a breath.
Breath. Yeah.
All right. So,
Struck dumb by his forearms.
it doesn't ever get old. It doesn't. All right. So that's the end of the romance ones. These are just more personal about you. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Coffee.
Coffee in the morning, tea in the afternoon.
I am tea.
I am so sorry. I am so not being. I'm not following the rules. I apologize.
I'm tea all day, every day. Just
Yep.
inject it right into my veins. Scones or cake?
Scone.
Cake.
Scone.
Yeah, and I would break the rules with this one and say brownies. I would rather have
Oh,
brownies.
we can break the rules? Cookies. I'm not into cake and
all right.
scones that much, but cookies, man.
Cookies. A mountain cabin or a lakeside cottage?
Lakeside cottage.
Lakeside.
I would go lakeside as well.
Okay.
Yep.
I probably would as well, unless I could break the rules and get a lake up in the mountains. Then I would take that. But if I had to choose,
All right, we're gonna break the rules
The
all over the place. I
mountain
want a
man
house on the
waves.
beach.
we're throwing the rules out the window. Early bird or night owl?
Night
I
owl.
know.
Night owl.
Yep, me too. All right, and this has been a huge debate at Schuler Books over on our TikTok. We made several videos about this one. Hardcover or paperback?
Paperback.
Paperback.
Paperback. But really, either.
Well, it's all
All good.
it's all good. And if it's the right book, it
Yeah.
sounds so stupid. It's all about where I'm going to be reading it.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
if I do buy a hardcover, like I try to save those up for hardcovers are better when you're seated. So like if I know I have an airplane trip, like I always save a JD Robb for an airplane trip because I can read one in an airplane trip and they're wonderful, but it's hardcover. Like you can't lay back and
Yeah.
hardcover very comfortably.
Right.
So, and I tend to, when I'm in my home, I tend to be a very prone reader.
I think my response was paperback because I can fit more on the shelf and I just have no space left on my shelf. So paperbacks fit a little bit better, but all right. We are getting very tight on time. So my last major question for each of you is, what are you reading right now and enjoying? And I will be taking notes for recommendations.
Mm.
Okay. So when I don't read romance, I usually read thrillers. So I won't go into that. But on the same day that our books came out, my friend Maya Rodale had out a book too that I read. It's called The Mad Girls of New York, and it's based on the real life Nellie Bly. Like this book was like written for me. She went out and found a real historical person and novelized their real historical exploits. And it's so good. It's wonderful. And I would give it, I'm giving it away. I bought one. She sent me a draft and then she sent me a print copy and I was like, I bought my own too. So I just heartily endorse that one.
All right.
I am
And
so
what
looking forward to reading that. I thought about, when that book was announced that she was writing that book, I caught my attention. So I'm
Yeah.
very, very much looking forward to reading that one.
I loved it.
and what about thriller? What's your favorite thriller that you've read recently?
Lately I've been reading through the Lucas Davenport books by John Sanford.
Okay.
Although I think Virgil Flowers is a better hero, but Davenport's pretty good. That's
All right.
That's the kind of book I like.
Okay. All right, Gina or Addison, what are you reading?
I'm trying to bring the cover up. Here, I think. A Scandalous Countess
Okay.
by Joe Beverly.
Oh, Joe Beverly.
I think I've read it. This is a reread. So I think I've read it 2 or 3 times before. And I do that. I love going back to those keeper books.
Mm-hmm. I've taken to downloading audiobooks or getting audiobooks of my favorites to listen to them. And I always hear something different when I'm listening to when I read it.
Yes.
Print. So what about you, Addison? What are you reading?
So I have been thoroughly enjoying, Lorraine Heath, who I will read anything she writes. I love her books. The Girls of Flight City is her first World War II book. And so it's tremendous. It's just absolutely wonderful. I was very fortunate to get an early read on it, and it is just amazing. And then the other book that I've been talking about that I have not read yet, it doesn't come out until end of August. So 2 authors who are also friends, Nicole Helm and Megan Crane, are writing as Hazel Beck. And they've got a book out called Small Town Big Magic that I am just like anxiously waiting to just inhale this one. I love both their writing. And so I'm looking forward to this one as well. I feel like witches kind of come in and out as a both as kind of an archetype and as a trope. And so they're starting a new witch series, and I'm very excited to read that. I thoroughly enjoyed Aaron Sterling's XX. Witches have kind of had a resurgence, and so it's fun because it's similar to actually similar to what we've talked about the whole time. I love when you have those tropes that you enjoy, but somebody just puts a fresh new spin on it in a way that you hadn't thought of. It takes all the things that you love about it, and it's like, ooh, something new. So, so definitely some things that I'm looking forward to.
I just listened to the audiobook of The Viscount and the Vixen by Lorraine Heath.
Yeah.
Man, woman can write.
She is amazing.
It's amazing.
She is lyrical. She's amazing.
The characters are just so clear from the beginning, and you can feel all of the feelings all of the time. All right, and then
I'm sorry, Amy, and to that end, that's actually one of the things that I love so much about Girls of Flight City is that same richness of her characters, even though you've got a different setting and a very different book, a historical fiction book, all of that feeling of those characters and just what their emotions are, she channeled that beautifully. So so it's definitely a good read.
all right, very quickly, what can we expect next from each of you?
So as I mentioned, Amnesia. So the second book in the Rendezvous Creek series is Forget Me Not Cowboy, and it comes out in November.
I think that we'll be talking to you again in November.
I hope so. I just
another round of this.
Look forward to joining in on the other side on Facebook over the next several months. This has been very fun.
Yes. All right, Gina, what's up next for you?
For Scott's Heart Only, the third book in the Scottish Treasures series. It is Mary, a corset maker, and it's the first time I've written a love triangle. Ooh. So yes, it's a mild love triangle, and the guy is an anti-hero, one of the guys, and she falls for the shipmaster, who she kind of wrangles into helping her get the last of the gold, but then not really. So I'll just leave it like that. That is March of 2023.
March, okay. All right, and what about you, Caroline?
The thing I'm working on at the moment, trying to finish up, is, since this is the last book in my series and it answers the open question that's been throughout the series, I'm writing a very long epilogue to the series, and I'm taking questions from readers. If readers have read the series and want to know what happened to the couple from book 1, or they have any questions about book 2, or they would just like to know more about something from any of the books, I'm putting it all into my ultimate fan service epilogue based on your questions, and that I hope to have that out in the next few weeks.
May I ask a question? Are you going to do like a spin-off series with more of these couples, or?
I don't know. But right now, this is meant to tie off this series. I'm working on a new series, but it's still kind of in the fledgling stage, and I'm not going to jinx it by talking about it.
Maybe all of these possible heirs that have come through in the Desperately Seeking series could come together for a heist somewhere.
They're all rich now. They don't need it.
Well, maybe it's an heirloom, like in Gina's book. It doesn't have to be a super, doesn't have to be about money. It could be
I think I got to start something new for the heist. Still waiting. But if you have any more ideas, please email me.
Found jewels.
Found jewels.
All right. Well, thank you all. It has been a treat. Yes, Gina.
One more thing. Just for the readers, like as a parting gift, I have a free download novella on my website homepage. You'll see it. It says that it's for the people who watch this live stream, and I'll keep it up till May 5th. So yeah,
wonderful. All right,
and it's been lovely to be here with you guys.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
cannot wait to continue this and to continue looking for your books. Thank you, everybody who is watching tonight. Be sure to come in Schuler Books or Nicola's Books or go on our websites to order these 3 wonderful romance novels from Avon or any of the other ones. If you come to Grand Rapids Schuler Books, I will talk your ear off about half of the romance section. I will happily recommend anything and everything. So thank you to Avon for the partnership, for reaching out. This is a real treat. And tune in next month. I believe it's May 26th. I get to speak to Vivian Lorette and Joanna Shoup. So that's my next big treat. But until then, thank you. Find your romance novel, your happy ending. And I hope you all stay safe and well. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.